Every once in a while, something happens that feels so meant to be. And that is how I felt when I got this episode's listener question. The question that came in for this episode is: my boyfriend and I have a bucket list dream to RV around the USA, but I am terrified to make it happen. How do I overcome the fears, worries, and blocks and make it happen? I think we'll regret it if I don't go. Now, I just happen to have one of my best friends in the entire world, Jess Dawson, who did an incredible cross country RV road trip. And when I read this question, I thought I have the world's perfect co host for this episode. Jess, I'm so happy that you're here with me today.
Me too. So happy to be here, Sim.
Jess Dawson is a native Californian who grew up in Ohio with me and now lives just outside of Austin, Texas. A content creator for over 15 years, Jess is a storyteller who respects a pithy tagline and has worked for Lyft, Slack, DoorDash, Imperfect Foods, Faire, Square, MasterClass, GitHub, and others. In 2018, she and her husband swapped the crowded streets of San Francisco for the open roads of America. From their Winnebago, Jess collaborated with freelance clients on everything from brand guidelines to product marketing. She now lives among the oak trees with her incredibly patient husband and adorably skeptical son and their two pups. She considers chutney a near perfect condiment. I'm so happy that you're here with me today.
I'm so happy to be here. This is literally the dream.
As I mentioned, and as I just shared, you are the perfect co host for this episode because not only am I sure you would have great ideas no matter what about this person's question on making their dreams of an RV road trip come true, but you have literally made your dream of an RV road trip come true. And so I feel like you're going to be able to speak to this question on so many different levels, both more of like the conceptual level, but also the very practical level. So I would love to hear from you. When did the idea of doing this cross country road trip, this trip around America, first come to you and Brian? Was it your idea? Was it his idea? Who brought it up? How did you bring it up? Like, how was this seed planted?
I'm trying to remember the exact moment that we thought getting an RV was a good idea, but it was around our 30th birthdays, so 8 friggin' years ago, which is insane.
So wild.
Um, but I turned 31st, like 11 months before Brian, and then I was thinking about his 30th, and a couple of friends and I thought an RV would be cool. Brian had mentioned getting an RV would be fun, but like nowhere near was it in our brains that we would ever live in an RV. We're just like, let's go on an adventure for your 30th. We'll bring another couple and see how it goes. So we rented like a 32-foot RV named Faire.
I love that.
Um,
For people who
and
don't know RVs, is that a big RV? Is that a small RV?
it's like pretty medium sized, pretty
Okay.
average. Our the one that we ended up getting was 26 feet, and that was one of the smallest of that class. So there's different
Hmm.
classes. But 32 is long when you have only driven like a Jeep or like, a normal car.
Yes.
It's a lot of feet.
I
Like
can't
it's like driving
imagine.
a huge
It
boat.
sounds big
No,
to
it's like
me.
there's no like the whole back end is just like it's insane. I did not drive
Totally.
it.
When it comes
Um
to RVs, size matters.
Absolutely. Like this is the one case where it 100% matters. You will get very different effects with different sizes. I'm just gonna say that. But yeah, so we rented this RV for just a weekend, just like I think 4 days, and we didn't do much. We just kind of sat in it. We had four people, so it was kind of full, so to speak. Like I wasn't just being Bry, and we went up to the redwoods. We went up the coast. Like it was so much fun and silly, and like felt very like we were camping. And like this is kind of cool. And then we kind of like tucked that away and like lived our lives. Um, and then I was kind of getting stuck in my job. I wasn't loving it as much, and we were in San Francisco, so our apartment was 450 square feet, super small, and we didn't know where we wanted to go next. But we also hadn't traveled the country together much. I grew up in Ohio, obviously, and Brian grew up in Texas, but we hadn't really lived anywhere else. Um, so we kind of were like, interesting. Could we maybe take that experience in the RV that we enjoyed and get on the road, and maybe I could freelance write, and we just go for it because we can't afford anything else in San Francisco. Like, there's no real downside. I don't know. It just seemed like the right time. And I kind of reached out work wise to just put my feelers out there and see if I could even get any clients, because I had no idea how to contract at that point, or freelance. And it kind of was the right time. Like, everyone was kind of leaving where I was at the moment and going to other tech companies, and they needed help. So it kind of like naturally progressed. And then Brian did all of the homework of finding the RV and like what size. And this is getting like kind of into the weeds.
No, this is, well, but the thing is, this is why I'm like, no one can speak. We want to get in the weeds. No one can speak to the weeds of this. Like you can, right? I would have no idea. I'm like, I don't know, make your dreams come true.
Well, I guess like the point is like dabble in your dream a little, like
Yep.
like try it for a weekend, see how it feels. Because maybe you'll hate it. Maybe it'll be like, why would I want to live in a moving vehicle? Like, maybe you don't like that. Or maybe it's so magical because you can just open your door and there's the redwoods, and then the next day you're in San Francisco and it feels right. Um, so yeah, Brian, I think I secured the idea that I could work. I told work, Brian got the RV. We decided to not get a car to tow, which is a big decision. And we switched that decision halfway through. Both are great. But because of that, we got basically like the smallest of the class that we got that we could, so that we could like go more places and park. The size of it is basically 2 parking spots. So like if you're in a Trader Joe's parking lot or something, you can take up 2 spots and not have to like go on the edge and park, which is like a logistics thing you have to think about all the time in an RV. And then Brian did a lot of, Brian was like basically our tour guide, like our master planner in terms of like logistics. And I was more like, oh, I'll make a Google map of all the bars and restaurants and I will work on the road. So we like divvied up the like logistics of it like that. We made a few tweaks to the RV, which I feel like even the smallest tweaks make such a big difference.
What were some
Because
of the tweaks you made to the RV that made you feel
oh my
more at
gosh.
home in there, that made it feel like yours?
Well, for some reason, even like a 20, like brand new RV has like 1970 vibes or 1980. Like it is like the window things that cover the windows. I forget what they're called. They have an off there. It's a real thing. Like it's a thing that covers the windows and it's hideous. Like it actually is. It made it into the dictionary. Um, Removed those and added like very simple curtains so that they were like kind of simple. You could just like completely move them up so you could see everything, because that was another reason we chose the class of RV that we did, is because of that big windshield. So that's like the type we chose. Another class, that's class C, class A. And then a class C is more like the truck, like a pickup truck with like a bed on top. So it's just a normal windshield. So like having that big windshield, we had tried both actually, and like in a test drive or something. And the big windshield was just like game over. It was so much better.
You
So we did
literally feel like you're
that.
looking at a postcard. Like
Yeah.
when you all came through Columbus and I got to
Yeah.
be in your RV, I could not
Yes.
believe how amazing the view up front was. Truly
Yeah.
incredible. You feel like you're literally, yeah, like looking at a
Yeah.
postcard.
Yeah. It's just like a panorama of whatever city you're in. So even like Ohio and Columbus, in the city you've always lived in, like you kind of like see it in this new light because you're moving while you have this really beautiful windshield that had like 1 gazillion bugs on it at any given moment. Brian was always watching it. Um, but so that was a really big one. The backsplash was hideous on like behind the stove. So I did like those sticky, like stick on white subway tiles,
Mm-hmm.
and it like made such a difference. We added a bunch of photos on the wall, which was its own disaster because we had slides that go in and out to make the RV bigger when you're stopped. And the RV, like if they weren't the right thickness, like it would catch and rip them off the wall.
Bye-bye
So
photos.
that happened a couple times, like, and or they would fall because like we're on a dirt road or stuff like that. And then my favorite, I would say my favorite upgrade, like little tweak we did, because we honestly we didn't do a lot of tweaks. Like people like go crazy in RVs. We just did like fun homey stuff. Was wallpaper in the bathroom. And we did this like
So cute.
it was like white background with little red drawings of a man and a woman with like a dog and like a fire and trees. And it just was like the epitome of the vibe that we were, you know, it was just like we're outside, we're just together and we're enjoying nature. And it was just in this like when you're in RV, like you're literally like the wall is like 2 inches in front of you when you're on the toilet. So it's like really nice to be able to just like see something pretty in front of you.
It makes it cozy.
Yes. And so I got to see that every time I went to the bathroom, which was all the time. A really good perk of being in an RV is you can go to the bathroom when you're moving. It is
That is it's
incredible.
like an airplane.
Yeah, it's like it is a game changer. We got out of the RV. I was devastated that we had to stop every time I had to
Oh
go pee.
my gosh, that's so funny. I love this. So for the first, it sounds like for the first half of your long trip, and we'll talk about your trip because I think this will be so fun for people to hear about. But for the first half, it was exclusively the RV, and that was your house, and that was also your vehicle.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
halfway through, you decided to buy a separate vehicle and tow it on the RV.
Correct. It was more like honestly like 3/4 of the way through, but yes, we eventually like we need a vehicle.
You need a vehicle.
Yeah.
I think I remember. I feel like just in general for RVing, I have only had one other than like getting to be in your RV when you drove through town. I've
I
only
like
had
remember the kids coming in.
they loved it. We've had one RV experience, which I will say was so fun and was so positive. It was the first spring break. I don't even want to call it post COVID because it was when people were starting to do more, but you
Hmm.
still weren't going to like a hotel and like staying with a bunch of people,
Yes.
So
Yes,
you
yes.
had more
Venturing
freedom to
out.
do things, but yeah, you were still trying to be cognizant. And so we rented an RV and our friends rented an RV and we did like side by side, we RV'd down to Red River Gorge and did like a couple days there. We camped in our RVs. We went climbing. We ate it outside at Miguel's Pizza. Like it was such a fun
Ugh.
RV trip. And my kids to this day bring it up all the time. They're like, are we ever going to do, when are we going to do RVs again with Crosby and Eloise? Like they want to do RVs all the time. That's my only time doing an actual like RV trip. It was so fun. But I don't know a lot about RVing. I guess I actually have two questions for you. Number one, did you and Brian do RV stuff growing up? And number two, what little things did you learn about being in an RV that you're like, wow, wish someone had told me about this? I feel like I'm remembering one time a fridge door opening and blueberries going everywhere. And you like came up with a way to keep your refrigerator closed, like tips like that. So were either one of you from an RV family or what tips did you learn being on the road?
Yes, there were definitely flying blueberries. Um, a lot. And yogurt and like just stuff that's not fun to be flying all over the RV. But the first question, did not grow up with RVs, but my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad, did a cross country road trip when they were older. So it was like very typical, um, retired, wanted to golf everywhere, I think. And so they would go and park the RV in a park, which is not usually what we did. And like hook it up and then like go to the golf, I think, and then come back and then go to their next spot. So it was a little less chaotic than ours, which was very fast. And we did as much like kind of off the grid stuff as we could. But they have this really cool old map of like where they went, and I have it to frame eventually. So I feel like and I can like see my grandpa kind of like underneath the RV working on it at his house. Um, but that's my only real memory, and it was never in one until Faire. And I don't think Brian was either. We weren't in trailers, nothing. So I'm not sure where we got the idea, but we got it. And then, oh my gosh, so many tips. So yeah, the first, like within minutes of being on the road, the bottom drawer underneath the fridge, which was a big drawer. I had a lot of snacks and stuff in there. It was it was on the ground. So I was like, I can load this up. It had a lot of stuff in it. The first like big turn we took, it just flew off of like out of the drawer. Like it was no longer in there. It was broken, like immediately broke. So I got very good at unbuckling while we were moving, running back and like securing stuff enough so that we could keep going without us stopping. And the cabinets would fly open and we have glasses in there. We got all non-breakable stuff because please get all non-breakable stuff. But even so, like if like a flying saucer of a non-breakable plate is coming at your head, it's not going to feel good. So I just, I do wonder how much actual like moving they did in these RVs when they were testing them, because I'm like, did you not put anything in the cabinets? Like we didn't put a lot of stuff in there. It was just like, so reinforce everything. Like we had to double reinforce all of the cabinets, all the drawers. The fridge immediately would swing open. Everything fell out, like the berries, the yogurt, the milk, like the hummus, like all the stuff that you don't want to like, see on the ground.
Not the hummus.
Not the hummus. And so it had like a screw that you like screw to close it on top of just a normal close, but that quickly like wore down. I know there's a term for that, but it like quickly did not work. So we had to put like one of those kind of like Velcro things that you like can stick. So it was like you like rip off the Velcro and like close it. And we did that to both the fridge and the freezer. Trying to think of other good tips.
Maybe like Wi-Fi tips, because you were working on the road a lot. And I think just as this person saying like, how do I overcome like my fears and like hurdles and stuff? I know that obviously you are incredible at your job. You have all these very important clients and you rely largely on the internet to facilitate you being able to connect with them, to deliver your work product, all of that. What were the like anything you learned about the logistics of finding internet, having internet, keeping internet? What was that like?
It was kind of the worst part because I think it's probably better now. I mean, we did this from 2018 to 2022. So there's been probably some
4 years. Do you all hear that? They did this before. It's like incredible.
It was pretty awesome. But I do think like Starlink is now a thing, which is and I think that could, I honestly don't know how it works or if you need like what you need to buy to make it that work. But I think that would be a really good solution that we could only kind of like, we sort of knew about it, but it wasn't ubiquitous enough for us to just get. So we had one of those like little Wi-Fi, like Verizon things, that you can buy a certain amount of minutes for. Didn't always work. The minutes didn't always, register or something. A lot of the RV parks had internet, quote unquote, but like it wasn't very good. So like that's not always reliable. So always read reviews, I would say, because lots of people are very good at RV park reviews and like being honest about what is actually available. And honestly, most parks are pretty upfront if their internet doesn't work. But you can also search if your cell service works so that you can do like what's it called, a hotspot.
Yep.
Which we did a lot. And I got very good at only using the internet when I absolutely needed it. So it's not like I'm sitting there writing while I'm on the internet. Like I get what I need, get the information I need, do offline Google Google Docs. And then I can just write for, a couple of hours. And then when I need to turn it in or ask a question or research, I can just turn on the internet for like 10 minutes. It's like not the smoothest thing to do, but very doable. And I do think a huge part of being in the RV for us, at least, was like being off the grid and not available. So it was a lot about communicating to my clients, I'm available these times. They knew I was asynchronous. So I wasn't in a lot of meetings. And when I was, it was stressful and not fun. But for the most part, I didn't need to be face to face with anyone. I could just get the brief and then write and then deliver. So I think making sure you have some kind of way to do that so you don't stress out. Like, so because you don't want to be sitting there with no service, not being able to enjoy it, because it really is magical when you're out there and like the stars are out and you can't hear anyone and you can't be contacted and it doesn't matter because you're with your husband and you know what I mean? It's just so magical. And I would say like Panera and Starbucks and like, those places were such a treat because we got to go in and we would park and like stay for a couple hours, get a big chunk of work done. Brian would do research on where we were going next. Like, they were always very reliable and like kind of like little, like really cheesy beacons of almost like safety. Because we had internet again and it feels a little like I wish it didn't, but it does feel like a little unsettling when you need internet, but you can't get it.
Totally. Well,
So
and
yeah,
it sounds like it gave you an
yeah.
appreciation for it too, that
Oh
probably is
my gosh.
lost for a lot of us who are used to constantly being hooked up, constantly having access, constantly people having access
Yes.
to us. I am sure there is a bit of a discomfort or an unease about that, but
Mm-hmm.
also probably the flip side of it. It's like when you go it's like when you go to wine country and you find out how much work it takes to make a glass of wine, you're like, "Oh my God, I appreciate this glass of
It's
wine
delicious.
so much more than when you're just drinking wine and you don't think about it," right? It's like you
Truly.
probably had such a deeper
Mm-hmm.
appreciation for a strong Wi-Fi signal.
I mean, a
Like,
hundred
wow.
percent. You're so right. It was true. Like every time we got it, we're like, okay. And we used our time so efficiently too. Like it was like, okay, we have 1 hour. We're gonna do these four things. I'm gonna have my music downloading because I would always have Spotify offline,
Mhm.
music trying so that when we didn't have service, we're not just sitting there listening to the same album. So yeah, we really learned how to use our time efficiently in the Wi-Fi. And I'm still 2 years later, it is like seeing those little bars on my little Wi-Fi, just like when I wake up, like it's just there. And it's very comforting and nice, but it's also nice when like, you lose service, you don't need it. So it's like a little bit of a balance.
Totally. When you were getting ready to take this trip and you were exploring, because this was a professional change for you, you had
Mm-hmm.
as and I know you are so successful, your work is stable, but when you go from something that is more traditionally stable, where you're like, I have a job,
Yes,
I
yes,
have a
yes.
salary, there's stability
Mm-hmm.
to this, to moving to entrepreneurship where it's this
Yeah.
client for maybe a shorter period of time, contract work, gig work, like that kind of thing. It can feel a little bit unsettling. Like that is a big professional shift. Was
Mm-hmm.
were you nervous? Were you afraid? Were you ready? Like what was your mindset like as you were needing to make professional changes to facilitate this really cool adventure?
Yeah, I was definitely ready to leave Lyft. It was just time to go. So that was a good place to be in terms of I was ready for something new and different type of work, different subject matter. Um, and I think we also, Brian and I, talked about how long we could last if it didn't work and I got no clients. And, that was like a certain amount of time and got us to spot A. Um, so we kind of had a fallback plan and could just, if it didn't work out, that's okay. We can still enjoy this trip and because we had, yeah, I think a couple weddings that year or something. We had a destination we had to get to at the other side. Um, so I think having that fallback plan was like a nice little safety net. And I figured for better for worse, like we can always come back and I can look for another job or we can go stay with our parents, God forbid. Um, or, like it just, there was a couple of things we could do worst case scenario and they weren't terrible because the state we were in, we were just very ready to leave the city. We were very ready to leave our apartment. We wanted an adventure. And it just felt the timing just felt really right. Like we had the doc. I'm a big Google Doc girl, and we had the Google Doc for like a year. Like putting stuff in it and like really planning. And of course, you can only plan so much, but it was. I feel like it's a, like half just chance and literally stepping off the edge and hoping it works. And if it doesn't, you do have the fallback and it's okay and you learn something and worst case we get to
Yes.
go to a couple like national parks and see how we do in an RV as a husband and wife.
Totally, 100%. I love that. Like yes, you have things you're excited about. You've planned and prepared as much as you can, but also it sounds like there is a bit of like a surrender to the experience and
Yes.
letting go of all of these really heavy expectations and just saying like, yeah, we did as much as we could to make this work. Let's see how it goes and we can pivot if we need to.
Yes, and I like to be in control of my
Mhm.
schedule and what's happening, and that gives me a sense of like calm and confidence. And I just had to release all of that in the RV because the drawer came off flying, or it took 10 times longer to get somewhere than you think it is because you're in a 26-foot huge tank.
Yep.
So I think it really a lot like gave me that skill to, I mean, I'm still not great at it, but like you do learn to you kind of have to go with what the road throws at you because you cannot predict it
You
in a great
mentioned
way.
yeah, totally, totally. I love that it helped you to tap into your flexibility and your go with the flowness in a way
Little did
that
I
like
know.
few other experiences could, right? Like that's like that on like steroids.
Yeah. Or like, having a kid, maybe.
Yeah, or that. It's like our pets' heads are falling off.
Totally.
Drawers are flying out. Oh my gosh, you mentioned that when you all did the first RV, birthday experience. I think you said the RV's name was Flare. Did I get that right? Flare.
Yes.
And what I learned from you is that like naming an RV is it's like a sort of a big part of the experience. Will you tell us how you picked the name Layla for your RV?
Ugh, yes, I honestly I don't even know if naming RVs is something everyone does, but I know naming cars is, and I feel like we decided because of Flair. So Flair was just the model of
Oh,
the first
oh,
one,
I was like, what a cool
and
name.
I know, but we were like, her name is Flair, like,
Yeah.
ha ha ha. But for our RV, we're gonna be together on the road, so we felt like we needed to like bond with her a little. Um, and when I was growing up in Ohio, we would go to Tahoe every summer, and my dad would always play the Eric Clapton Unplugged album, which is epic and
So
still
good.
hits. Ugh.
Every time
Um,
Eric Clapton can
every
do no wrong. I'm like, I hope he
literally,
hasn't done any wrong. You know how like now it
yes,
feels like everyone has like some dark, like insidious story and you're like,
yes.
shouldn't like
You're like,
mention their name. I
oh,
hope
add it to
Eric
your
Clapton is
list.
okay, is an okay
Same,
guy.
too, please.
With the
Let
caveat
this
that I
be
did not
good.
Google him before this conversation. I hope he just hasn't done
Same.
anything horrific in
I didn't
recent
either.
times.
Yes, we'll just keep going, hoping he's okay, a good guy. Um, but yeah, and then so the Unplugged album was one of our favorites. And we also one of the improvements on the RV that Brian and his dad and my dad did was, I'm gonna butcher this, but like rewired it so that the battery would charge when we drove so that we could um, stay off the grid and not need to plug in as much, which is all kind of confusing until you're in it. But basically, it was just so we could not have to stay at RV parks for longer. So like we were unplugged from the grid, so to speak, and also kind of unplugged from the phone world. So those all tied together neatly, and we love the song Layla, and she just seemed like a Layla. And so she became Layla. And then when we got our car 3 years later, we named him Eric after obviously Mr. Clapton. I hope he's a good man.
I hope he's a good man. Eric, come through for
If
us,
you're
please.
please just be
Oh, I
listening.
love that so much. What a perfect way to name your RV and your car. And it's true, you're on the road. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a member of your family.
Yeah. She was she did so good. Like we took her down some crazy roads that
Yeah.
maybe we probably shouldn't have. And she was a trooper. So
You obviously did this trip around the US for 4 years, and I am wondering when you think back on it, what were some of your favorite places that you visited? Some of the favorite places you got to see, like a favorite meal you might remember? Like what are the
mm,
highlights when you look back on that
gosh.
experience?
I mean, the first one that I always think of that was just surprising to me. I don't think it's surprising anymore because of like Yellowstone and all that, but Montana is just stunning and different and just so gorgeous. Glacier National Park was one of our favorites because it just offers these huge mountains and then these incredible glacial lakes and so many animals and great hikes. And we happened to go when it was all open, there was no fires. Like it was just a really perfect experience. We saw a lot of moose and elk, and we went paddleboarding. There was like a guy with this horn, and it was like literally like I felt like I was in Switzerland, with like this like guy blowing some horn. And it was just a magical place all around. So loved all of Montana. I loved Maine. Like Maine feels very kind of like Texas feels like its own like state meant like the mental mindset here is like Texas is its own like I feel but Maine is very different, but kind of has that mentality where they're just like Maine is like a different country. Like the people there are just so in love with Maine. Portland is kind of reminded me of a small San Francisco because it's very walkable. The food is amazing. It's right by water. The people are wonderful. Good shopping. It was just, and it's right by Acadia, which is just like we tried to time it. Brian timed it so that we were there during fall. So like the colors
Oh,
were insane. And I've been in San Francisco for so long and in California that I hadn't really seen fall in a long time, like real deep fall. And it was just magical. Um, what else? I think just like people like seeing our friends along the way, like seeing you guys, having so many people come enjoy the RV experience was just like so fun and ridiculous now that I like think back about like our friends like in these tight quarters with us and Brian kind of like jerry rigged this like ridiculous bed. Like we had an extra bed, but it was also kind of like high up above the cab and not everyone wants to go up there. Um but it was just like, I don't know, everyone was really game to do it with us and like explore, and they were very excited to because I don't think a lot of people like you're saying like have gone in an RV, and it was fun to kind of piggyback on our experience and experience things with us for the first time, and like going to Yellowstone with Brian's brother and his wife, and yeah, I think stuff like that was just it was just like a nice mutual experience with our friends when it's like our adventure, but we got to experience it with so many of our loved ones, and it was so nice.
totally. And I also think what's so neat for other people about this is you and Brian, you've become the experts. So people get to come
Oh.
out and have this amazing RV experience, but they didn't have to do like all the research and
Yes, well,
figure it
that's true.
out. And it's like, oh, we get to show up
Get the
and this is
water.
yeah, right? And you have taken care of everything, which I think probably made it very fun and relaxing for friends to
Yeah.
come and piggyback onto your adventure. They get to experience the adventure, but
Yes.
without any of the figuring out, like before or
Experience.
yes, before or after. Um,
Mhm.
for me, as your friend, it was so amazing to see all of these places through your eyes. I haven't done a ton of traveling around the continental US. I haven't been to many national parks. That just, like, hasn't been my, like, travel experience, and I got to see so many places when you would post pictures. You are, like, the world's best Instagram story maker, and I felt like I got to travel around the US with you, and it was so amazing, and because of you, Montana is, like, my number 1 dream trip that I'm like, "I wanna take this trip so badly." And it was also so cool to see you and Brian, like, develop these I don't wanna say new hobbies, but, like, really cultivate maybe, like, a deeper connection with hobbies. Like, you guys did so much paddle boarding, and that was, like, so amazing to see, and Brian got so into photography, like, his photos are
Ugh, I know, it's so good.
incredible, like, it's amazing. And that was just so cool. It's like, maybe that wouldn't have happened if you all
Totally.
hadn't had like, done this and had this experience. So I think it's also really neat, like, when you have a dream or you have an idea, you think that that's gonna be the thing that you get out of it, but I think
Mhm.
sometimes saying yes to that also opens up other doors and
Yeah,
facilitates you connecting with other experiences and passions and opportunities that you don't even know are waiting for you, and if you don't
totally.
say yes to that first thing, like, you don't get to connect with it, so it's been just amazing seeing all of that happen for you all, and also, like, you did such amazing like writing and reviews for like restaurants along the way. Of
Mhm.
course, you're so gifted with putting words to experiences. And that was like so awesome too. It's like maybe you wouldn't have done that if it weren't for getting to jump to all of these different places like across the US.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a good point. Like I definitely had a very crisp image of what this trip would look like. It involved me cooking while we were driving, which I'm just like, I cannot, like, I don't even know where I got that, but I was like, oh, I'll make meals for the night whilst driving. I will turn on the stove and the oven. Like, what? Um, so I think, and it surpassed my expectations because, and it didn't like meet any, like it met them in a way that it was totally different, and better. And I do think it gave us such an appreciation for America, which sometimes is hard to come by. But like just the beautiful places, the different kinds of people, like, I, part of why we wanted to get out of California was because we're kind of like, we'd been there since college. Like it had been a long time, and we kind of felt like we're in this bubble, and it's a beautiful bubble. But there's so, like, the minute we left, we're just like, oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful country. There's so many other cool spots that are just as good. They're just different. And I feel like the minute we kind of got on the road and felt that kind of release from the city, we were just like, oh, this is like, it felt like the right decision, which it doesn't always, I don't think that's always the case. Like it doesn't immediately always feel perfect and right. And it wasn't perfect, but like it just felt like the right decision. Like it just felt good. And like, the chaos and like very steep learning curve that came with it. But yeah, it was definitely a lot of unexpected and wonderful things. And I do not think we would be here at all if we didn't take that trip. So I'm very
Totally. It
grateful.
helped you find your home and it helped you pick where you wanted to
Yes.
like really put down roots. And
Yeah.
you are in such an amazing, like you have such an amazing spot now where you live. And I feel like you getting to explore all of these different places, like literally wilderness, nature, cities, little towns. You got to see it all and then make a really, really like supported decision about what of all of
Hmm.
that you wanted to put together and where you wanted to call home. So that's just so cool.
Yeah, and I don't even know if we would have Huck. Like I
Yeah.
just, because we had all these adventures, and we kind of, it was like sowing our seed, sowing our oats. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
that saying is,
Yep.
but just like with adventure a little bit before we felt ready to kind of like settle down. And once I got in the house, I was like, oh, I can actually see a family here, which I hadn't been able to see for 15 years with Brian. Not because of Brian, just because of like
Right.
lifestyle. Like it just wasn't conducive.
Yeah. Oh, I love this so much. Thank you. It's so fun for me to get to hear about your adventures. And I know everyone listening is going to, number one, probably feel inspired to say yes to an idea or a dream that they have. But also, like specifically with what you shared, it's just very cool to hear because I think very few people get to have or choose to have an adventure like you all had. And it's amazing to get to live vicariously through you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so honored to be on this podcast, which I know is one of your dreams. So you are leading by example. And it was just like so much fun to chat with you and share. I haven't thought about it in a minute, so it was fun to kind of relive it.
Oh, thank you so much. I love you, and
Love
I will
you.
talk to you soon.
Okay.